Hey folks, BlackCross here. Welcome back to another episode of the PlayStation 2 Legacy bonus content, where we take a look at various of different stuff about the PlayStation 2 that most people may not be aware of and stuff of that nature. But there's one thing I want to go ahead and talk about today, and that's only because of the fact of a future topic that I was thinking about doing, but then I decided, well, let's just combine them all together into one video, and that is the potential sales of PS2, as well as what other consoles could do in order to outbeat the PS2. For those that don't know, the PlayStation 2 is currently still, even after all these years, still the highest selling console based on the number of units that is sold currently to date, with 157 million to this day. We will talk about other things in the process of that nature, but for the time being right now, I want to kind of showcase how it managed to have sustained that successfulness for so long. So this right here, I've seen it a couple times, many times actually. It's astounding to actually watch something like this and not be baffled by it all. But the global annual gaming console unit sales. This is actually a pretty interesting chart to see, and it's created by Pie Chart Pirate. And I figured, you know what, let's take a look at how it did. Obviously, this is actually taking place in April 2002, right whenever sales for the PlayStation 2 actually spiked up. There was other consoles around that time period that was out there. Obviously, you have the PlayStation 1. Xbox peaked up there, as well as the Nintendo 64. But of course, we will see that transition from the N64 to the GameCube in just a bit. So let's go ahead and just kind of take a look at this and see how it progresses. You see the GameCube right there, it just sparked up. But even though while the other consoles are slowly growing, the PS2 is still like picking up speed. And right there, we just saw the PlayStation 1 just kind of vanish. Obviously, because of the fact that the PlayStation 2, of how it was made and stuff like that, it was made to where it was also a DVD player, a CD player, and not only does it play its actual PlayStation 2 games, it's also backwards compatible for PS1s. So right off the bat, there was no real need to have a PlayStation 1 system, because get a PlayStation 2, you can play both games consoles in one, which is a very nice appeal. As you can see, we're in 2006. PlayStation 2 picked it up real heavy, and while the Xbox and GameCube did pick up sales during its first release, PlayStation 2 was still going strong during this time period. So let's go ahead and continue on. And right there we saw the Xbox 360 kick into gear. Now, of course, obviously the Xbox 360 being as popular as it is, and I think compared to that of the Xbox, is probably the preferred console for most Xbox users. That's based on like the games that it's had available, as well as like its overall sales and stuff like that. But despite that the 360 shows up, we're about to see something interesting come up. So continuing on here, we have the Wii as well as PlayStation 3 kicking into the scene, and despite all of that, the majority of sales is still carrying through for the PS2, and we are still in 2007. So let's continue on. GameCube just vanished right then and there. Wii picks up in sales. Naturally, of course. The Wii was a very likable console, and based on what all it had coming up, obviously a lot of people kind of lost interest afterwards, but when it first came out, it was a huge market seller for a long period of time. And obviously it shows from both the PlayStation 3 and the 360. But as you can see, despite that, the PlayStation 2 was still carrying on even in 2008. And in fact, the interesting thing is that even during this time period that we got into the PlayStation 3 era, PS2 system was actually being sold regularly in stores, surprisingly. So let's continue watching this here. And while the Wii is still growing, the PlayStation 2 is still in a heavy control of staying in a mandate system. But then we see that the PlayStation 3 is slowly trying to surpass the other two consoles. And even with the three consoles still continuing on, the PlayStation 2 still hanged on in terms of potential sales. Not high as it was during the heyday that it was, but it still continued on sales regardless of that. And we're about to see it disappear as it continued on to the next generation, and there it went. It went completely gone. Obviously, for those that don't know, the PlayStation 2 stopped manufacturing actually on 2013. It stayed in production from 2000 all the way up to 2013. That explains why the sales cutoff was right there. Obviously, since they wasn't making any more PlayStation 2s, obviously sales for the system would cease right then and there. But we get to see this transition continue on with the other generation. So the PlayStation 2 managed to have lingered when the PlayStation 4 came up. But after the PlayStation 4, Sony decides to stop making the PlayStation 2 system, and thus it was completely off of the sales charts. Let's just go ahead and kind of finish it off here. Just kind of witness the decline of the Wii, the PS3. You see how the 360 actually hanged on there for a long period of time. Makes perfect sense because, again, despite all the stories that has been stated about 360's starting point, it was still a very likable console. And with the Xbox One, the debacle that it had at the start of this generation wasn't a very good start. Despite the fact that it had a really good sell over 360, a lot of people still hanged on to the 360. But after a year later, they changed their motives and got better. Sadly, the Wii U, unfortunately, did not do well either. It was mostly PlayStation 4, obviously, of course. But we're about to see if the Wii U vanish, and I believe the 360 will also vanish along with it after the Switch. And here it comes. Nintendo Switch shows up. And you're about to see this. A pretty substantial overcoming due to the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch just out of nowhere just came up, blew everyone's mind, and all of a sudden by 2020 it started to pick up. Now, of course, at 2020 that was also where game consoles such as the PS5 and the Series X soon came up, which meant that we had the, of course, COVID-19 pickup on selling consoles relatively fast. And unfortunately, we also had the problem of not being able to keep up with the production rate compared to the sales rate. So again, while we see the Xbox One and PS4 kind of slowly start to fade off, PS5 and Series X is slowly picking up, but the Switch unfortunately continues to hold a higher margin in terms of sales. And of course, that's where it ends right there. Now, of course, I do want to show you this right here, and that is the lifetime sales of video game console worldwide as of April 2022, which means it is up to date. Okay? Now, what I like about this is that it shows every game console, whether it be technically a handheld or an actual physical console, because in my personal opinion, you should classify the handhelds as an actual console, since it does play video games and stuff of that nature, it should be included into that. So we have the PlayStation 2 being at the top with a grand total of 157.68 million, almost 158 exact. But right behind it we have the Nintendo DS, which had a high sell of 154 million.9, which again, pretty impressive considering the fact that it was the DS. The 3DS though, where is it at though? I thought the 3DS, it's right there. It only did that much. I figured the way that it had kind of hanged on towards the end, I figured it would have at least made 100 million, but it didn't. That's a shock, actually, in all honesty. Sad thing is, it's not actually showing me when they stopped producing the regular DSs. That's actually kind of a shock, really. I'm really actually shocked by it. I figured that the 3DS out surpassed the 3D. I figured the 3DS outpassed the 2DS, the regular DS. But no, it seems like the DS sold more. Huh. That's kind of shocking, actually, in all honesty. Huh. Well, that, again, we are looking at the handheld market, of course. And most people, when they were talking about the Switch, they were talking about actual consoles, not the handhelds included. But since the Switch is technically both a handheld and console, you might as well include that. But let's actually talk about that. So we have the Nintendo Switch right here, and its highest sell is at 106 million. Now, yes, while Sony, the PlayStation 2 has been its most successful console to date, we have the PS4, which has done its sell at 116 million. Now, it could go up, depends on how many more they'll sell from here on out. They have not stated that they are going to shut down the production of the PS4, but since the PS5 is coming into the market and stuff like that, I imagine it won't be long before it will eventually just, stop production, and then the PS5 will slowly consume the PS4. But we still have the Nintendo Switch here to kind of talk about. Now, this is why I actually wanted to go ahead and put two videos in one, and that's to discuss the possibilities of, could the PS2, its record-selling hold, its record placement, could it be overpowered by the Switch? The Switch is by far the most revered console to date. Now, to me, this is actually a good thing, because to me, this tells me that Nintendo is going strong with the Nintendo Switch, and despite the fact that we are 5 years into it, they aren't stopping. They are still continuing with the Switch, and according to, I believe I heard it like a year ago, they said that they were halfway through its lifetime, and to me, I feel like maybe a lifetime isn't an accurate statement, because to me, I feel like if you ended 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you would be losing a lot more sales. Obviously, the Nintendo Switch is still selling right now. So, I want to give you a little scenario. What would make the Nintendo Switch finally peak up not only its original Nintendo DS, being the highest selling Nintendo console to date, but what would make it to where it could achieve over the PlayStation 2 and be the new crown reigning console seller of any console? What could make that happen? To me, it's a matter of continuous rate. We have the fact that Nintendo has continued on its continuous climb of making great games and selling it on the Switch, and because of how likable the Switch is, it's not just a console, it's also a handheld. You have the fact that you have the base Switch itself. You have the Nintendo Switch Lite, which means technically, despite the fact that it's not dockable, it's still the same console, which means if you want to transfer all of your data from the base Nintendo Switch to the Nintendo Switch Lite, you could, which is very nice for people who just are on the go all the time and they never have time to sit down in front of the TV to use the dock feature and stuff. It makes perfect sense. But should they continue their natural climb, I think it could get past at least the Game Boy system, the original Game Boy. But could it achieve past the Nintendo DS? Could it? Well, I guess that depends. It depends on how things go from here on out. If sales continue to pick up from here on out, like say for example, Nintendo revealed a number of new games that are extremely likable. yes, there are still a lot of games that are still coming out, like obviously Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out. There's Xenoblade 3 that's coming out in the next little bit. And then Pokemon Scarlet and, what's the other one? I forgot what the other one. I'll post it right here. I can't remember the other one. But the new Pokemon game that's coming up this year. So, if Nintendo continues to sell these likable games and keep selling them at record high, we could continue to see more sales for the base system itself. The only way that Nintendo could achieve such a magnificent goal and get that extra 50 million, the only way it can do that is if they extend the life cycle of the system. In other words, they continue it from here on out. In other words, give it another 5 years from now. It might actually achieve that number. But it's going to be close. We're going to see a surprising jump. What's going to happen is that if Nintendo hits it home run from here on out, like hits it clear home run right out of the park, has to have something that will grab people's attention, grab it almost instantly, overnight basically, we will see that jump. In fact, there's a rumor going around saying that Nintendo Switch, or Nintendo Online, will have Game Boy and Game Boy Advance available in the Nintendo Online. Which, if that happens, that could also possibly help increase sales as well. I mean, technically, the Nintendo Switch Online with the NES and SNES, and the inclusion of the N64 and Sega Genesis, which was a surprise on my hand. I was not expecting that feature. But to see that would definitely increase it a little bit. Not in terms of like major hype, because keep in mind it is a subscription service. But it definitely helps. It definitely helps sell the system. Should they release more titles that people want to see on there, which they are, it's a very, very slow process. But should they continue on, it could do it. Should they confirm the release of the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, it will continue to sell higher. Should they make more likable games, they will continue to sell more. Now, there is that possible like, oh, well, what if, and a lot of people keep throwing this out. In fact, it's died out since the OLED came out. But could they release a 4K version of the Switch? To me, I don't see that happening. I don't see it actually getting installed there. If it does, I believe it will then be upgraded to the Switch 2 or something. It's going to be something along that line. It's going to be where, okay, if we do put in a powerful system to where it could play more power-required games, we might as well just rename the brand and just call it Nintendo Switch 2. Which at that point would make sense. Will it succeed past the PS2 record hold? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that happens. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to talk about this because this is an interesting subject and it's an interesting thing to kind of look at because, yeah, could it succeed? Who knows? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch you guys later.